Thanks for tuning in to part 1 of 2 of the Love, Sex, and Relationships conversation. I was joined by 5 trans men of color from across the country. Even one individual joined us from the UK. Within the episode, we talked about stigma in our communities around love, sex, and relationships. We talked about finding love, moving in long-term relationships, and also transitioning while in long-term relationships. Some of the guests, just to mention a few, is Amari Leach, Kamari Romeo, and Dallas Martinez. I hope you enjoy. Hello, I'm your host, Sean Aaron, and welcome to Them Boys Inc. podcast. This show is a platform where trans men of color voices can be amplified as we share our transitional stories and many other issues that are relatable to trans men of color in our existence. This show is not only to amplify our voices, but to raise awareness and conversation around our lived experiences. Hey, this is Sean Aaron. I'm the founder and executive director of Them Boys Inc. I am also the host of Them Boys podcast. As you may know, Them Boys provides financial assistance to trans men of color in order for them to obtain gender-affirming surgery. We have great news. We're currently looking for volunteers to help support our programs. Our programs include our gender-affirming surgery grant program and also our personal care package program. We personally curate packages filled with personal hygiene items. Just to name a few, things like tissue, soap, towels, toothpaste, and toothbrushes. We mail them out to trans men of color across the country who may be in need of help caring for their personal hygiene needs. We are looking for volunteers to help raise funds to support our programs. Also, we're looking for someone locally to the Bay Area to help us put all of the care packages together. If our mission is something that resonates with you and you would like to help support our work, just let us know. You can send an email to hello@themboys.org. That is HELLO@DEMBOIS.org. And we will get back to you with further details. Thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoy the next episode. Welcome to Them Boys podcast. I'm your host, Sean Aaron, he, him, his. And today's episode is a really juicy conversation. So we're going to talk about love, sex, and relationships. And I have a few folks here with me, and we all going to talk about this. We're all going to get into this conversation, and hopefully you enjoy. So why don't you guys introduce yourself?
Hey, what's going on, everybody? I am Mr. Amari Leach. He, him pronouns. I am transman, stealth. I wanted to join this conversation to support and be a part of more Black men in the community that own businesses, that's doing well for ourselves and changing the community in our own lives. So I'm really honored to be here with all of you today, and I look forward to this conversation.
I am E.L. Winston. Most people just call me Winston. He, him pronouns. I am a trans man. I live in North Carolina by ways of Illinois. I wanted to be a part of this conversation because a lot of conversations that I see our younger men are a part of, and coming from a older man's perspective, I just turned 51 in September. I felt like I could learn some things, and I can probably impart some wisdom in some of the conversation, and that's why I wanted to be a part. And I'm excited. I'm ready. Thank y'all for having me.
My name is Dallas Martinez. My pronouns are they as well as he. And I am coming from Seattle, Washington today, but originally started out in Dallas, Texas. I'm just here because I wanted to add more diversity to the conversation. Most of the time we hear conversations about sex, love, relationships is coming from cis heteronorm perspective. So I just wanted to add my 2 cents as a person that's been happily committed and married the last 13 years, got 2 kids, been through hella relationships, had a lot of ups and downs along the way, a lot of learning, and just want to be a part of the conversation. Thank you for having me.
Hey everyone, my name is Kamari. My pronouns are he, him. I'm from the UK, specifically London, and I wanted to be a part of this conversation because I don't often hear about kind of stories around gay trans men or queer transmasculine men. So I'm at the point where I'd like to kind of share some of my experience and just also community. I just want to see who else is out there and just kind of connect with my brothers across the water. So yeah, thanks for having me.
My name is Naya'Hri Suhalia. My pronouns are he, him. Why did I want to join this conversation? I felt like it was a really great opportunity to be able to connect with other trans men. I'm still in the process of growing my my circle, my community. And also for the same reasons that Kamari gave, which is we don't really get to hear from many queer trans men specifically, and even more specifically than that, Black queer trans men, which seems to be such a niche. And then also to give a perspective from someone who is ethically non-monogamous and also someone who ethically practices kink and BDSM, because those things are really important. There's a lot of stigma around that. And to hopefully be able to share some of that with everyone and make a friend in the process, who knows? So that's why I'm here.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Amari, where are you from?
I'm originally from Louisville, Kentucky, but I am live in Seattle, Washington right now.
Okay, Seattle, Washington. So I think to start this off, I think one of the reasons why I wanted to have this conversation with folks, and it's also because people bring it up to me, the same things that a few of you said of like, we don't talk about this in our communities. We just don't talk about it. And Dallas, you talked about from a heteronormative point of view. I know that most of my sex conversations came from when I was in the barbershop, and it wasn't always geared towards what was specific to me in my life. So like my first question is like, there's this stigma when we're talking about sex, love, and relationships when it comes to trans men of color. And sometimes when you transition, we're expected to keep the same relationships and statuses of relationships that we had prior to transitioning. But my first question is, what do you think that stigma is about? Like, anybody want to speak on like, what is that stigma? Why aren't we having these conversations?
I think it's just it's a bit difficult in general for us to be able to talk about so many other things when you get past how we have to deal with society. When you get past how we have to deal with ourselves and our families and things of that nature. It's like you add on to that sex and relationships. It can be for many people a bit of a sensory overload, if you will. Not to say that it's not as important, because of course it is very important. I just think that with many things, it's a level to this shit. Now, of course, being in relationships and having a healthy sex life are very important things and things that we should be talking about. But at the same time, it's like so many other things that are like right in our face that's so pressing. It's kind of hard to, sort of tackle everything. So probably just a matter of people taking priorities and, and what they decide to have conversations about in a community or a group setting.
Yeah, I definitely agree with what that's just been said. I think for me, it's just the main journey has been making peace with my former self. And, I come from a culture where sex and talking about your body is very taboo. My family are African. And so, yeah, it's been a journey kind of coming full circle to basically find that sex education from other sources and to find it through self-exploration, exploration with others. And like Naya'Hri was mentioning, kink as well has been quite a fundamental part to me discovering different parts of myself. But there's an element of shame, I think. But yeah, I think for me, the main thing has been like making peace with my former self to get to this point and then be able to share with my community.
I think it's always been about making everybody else feel comfortable, and like Kamari said, like accepting your past self and you know what I'm saying, like really being on your own journey to learning what you like and not feeling bad about it, you know what I'm saying, and learning and finding from that strength on top of everything else to be like, okay, you know, I don't have to feel bad for what I'm experiencing and the questions that I have. And it's about creating safe spaces to talk about it and having those quote unquote uncomfortable conversations, because I feel like nothing should be that uncomfortable. We should be able to speak about it and learn and learn that everyone's different, you know what I'm saying? Because we all come from different backgrounds. So I think it's just about like not caring about making anybody else comfortable. And that's how we can beat down the stigmas.
I think that's hard to not make people comfortable, right? Because even within our transition, we try to make people comfortable about us transitioning. We try to make people feel comfortable about our name changes. So I think it's really hard to beat those stigmas sometimes. And I heard you all saying about being ashamed about, you know, your body and being ashamed about how you use your body. I know prior to now, I always identified as lesbian. And nope, and not everyone identifies the same way. You know, so not I've had guests that said they never identified as lesbian. So as I started to transition, things changed for me. So I started to feel embarrassed. I felt embarrassed about my body. I felt embarrassed about my biological parts. So it's all about like feeling comfortable, just like you said, Amari, like feeling comfortable. So what is the difference between living as a cisgender woman, being socialized as supposedly a woman, but then transitioning? Do you all know, like, what is the difference between those two? Do you know any differences that you feel right now?
I feel more whole. It's like I feel right. You know what I'm saying? Like I feel like who I've always been on the inside can finally live without restrictions. You know what I'm saying? Like I'm stepping fully into that power. Like because, you know, I was also ashamed, like to say, you know, when I was the other, you know, known as the other gender, that I had to, you know, be called a stud and things like that. And I never liked that. You know what I'm saying? Like I just liked women, but I knew deep down inside I was always a boy. I was always a man. So when I started transitioning, I felt free. It was like a caterpillar, you know what I'm saying? A butterfly coming out of the cocoon type feeling. So I just feel more in tune with myself, more happy, more like just okay. You know what I'm saying? Like I feel good.
I definitely agree. It's like for me, it was like somebody switched the light on. You know what I mean? Like all of a sudden, um, I became more confident. Not that I was not confident in who I was, but I wasn't that person. You know what I mean? It was like getting up every day, playing charades or something. You know what I mean? And the minute I started my transition, it was like everything seemed so much clearer for me, but also very much frightening at the same time because I'm married, right? We've been married for 7 years now, and it's like, okay, so how do I tell this person that I love? Like, you know, we started to have the conversations as things got clearer in my head, and so like now it's all these things that I'm exploring, and so how do I tell this person this? Are we gonna make it through this? Because you know maybe we are and maybe we aren't. You know what I mean? Because I am becoming someone different, not really different, but different. If that makes sense, you know what I mean? Like the person she knew is not the person going forward in a lot of ways, and so that was a frightening time. But a lot of times, I think for me, I overthink things because um as I started to have those conversations with her and parts of my family, they were like, "Well, we kind of already never saw you that way anyway." You know what I'm saying? Like I never identified. Like I use those labels because people put those labels on me. I never liked the word stud. Like that's a horse, yo. You know what I'm saying? That's not who I am. Like when you have dreams, I never dreamed as a girl. Like when I had dreams, I was always the boy in the dream. You know what I mean? And so these things were always I just didn't have the language at the time. And I'm fairly new in my transition, right? Like I started the transition at 48 and now I'm 51. And it seems like I'm trying to not catch up in a sense, but I feel like a teenager all over again, experiencing all these new things, doing like even to be here talking to y'all out loud about my truth is something very new and very something I wouldn't do as the past person I would. You know what I'm saying? It's just it's really been a different level of enlightenment for me as myself and looking inward, being able to express it outward.
I think for me, prior, I was socialized to be quiet, to be docile, to follow the rules. Like, don't ask any questions. Just take things as they are, not to be curious about things. I was an introvert. For the longest time, I just thought I was shy. And everybody just said I was shy. That's the way I'd get introduced when I was little. But I think really, what it was, at least judging from like where I am today, thinking back at it and comparing it, knowing that I am more outgoing now, that I am more extrovert now. I have no problem making friends. I have no problem entering a room with my head held high and striking up a conversation with people. I have no problem being in the courtroom and interjecting people and objecting people. Donning a suit, going in there and advocating for others. But I don't know that I would have had that same confidence prior had that little girl turned into an adult cisgender woman. I don't know if I would have been able to carry that same energy and have that same posturing. So for me, I think in a lot of ways, like the way I was socialized prior, it dimmed my light in a lot of ways. It put out my flame. Whereas now, transitioning, going through the surgeries, being on testosterone, being recognized by my family, my friends, for my more authentic self and having language of what that is now. Because it was always there. That was always me. But being able to put language to it and fostering that, there's a lot of differences and there are definitely positive impacts that do feed into, my relationships with other people, the way I love other people, even with sex. Like there's so many differences between who I am today and who I was then.
So Dallas, just to follow up a question with that, you said that you were married you've been married for 13 years. So when did you transition?
I started transitioning midway through the pandemic. So it's like at the beginning of 2020, I started to have conversations about top surgery. And that's when I was kind of just really on the surface, having freshly moved from Dallas, Texas to Seattle, Washington in 2017. I think it wasn't until I moved to the Northwest and got more experience with other people who had similar journeys where I started to realize, like, oh, I can do that too. And that's really when things started taking off. It's like during the pandemic when I really had a lot of time to just reflect, sit with myself and be honest with a lot of things, and kind of catch these similarities between me and other people that did identify as trans. And so that's where it kind of kicked off for me.
So in that relationship, has things shifted and changed for you, or do you feel like it's still the same?
I feel like it's the same in the sense of how I'm loved and how I'm supported, but I feel like things are different because I'm different. I bring a different energy to the relationship. There's things like I used to be more highly emotional. I could like cry over a Huggies commercial. Now like I could have a family member die and maybe I don't shed tears right away. Like I still grieve. I still go through things, but it doesn't look the same. And so I've changed. Therefore, I have to say my relationship has changed. But I can't say that I'm loved any less or that I'm less supported. In fact, when we had these conversations, my wife just looked at me and said, well, it's not a far-fetched idea, right? Like, this is who you've been. It's not like you're really changing anything. Now, the outward you is just going to more closely resemble what you've always felt and what you've always desired to be and look like, right? And so her thing was like, okay, now if you said you want to start wearing my dresses and like putting on my fingernail polish and wearing my makeup and stuff, she said, well, we might need to have more conversations about that so I can understand that better. But like, until then, we're good.
Hey, and if you did want to wear the dress or the fingernail polish, would she be open, even with the conversations? Do you feel like you would still be loved and held in that moment?
I think she'd want to know a lot more about it and try to understand it a little bit better. She might need to be carried on. She might need a little bit of hand holding for that one.
I got you.
But I'm sure at the end of the day she would.
I got you. Hey, this is Sean Aaron, the host of Them Boys Podcast. Are you enjoying the podcast so far? Great. I'm glad that you are. Would you consider donating today to help support the continuation of this podcast? As you know, this podcast aims to serve as a platform to highlight and amplify the voices of trans men of color and share our transition stories. The podcast not only aims to amplify trans men of color voices, but it also raises awareness around our lived experiences. You would like to donate? Where can you donate? Great. I'm glad that you asked. Link in our description will take you directly to Network for Good, whom we've partnered with in order to collect donations for the podcast. Or you can visit our website. On the website, click the donate button, and from there, you are able to donate directly to the podcast. All donations are tax deductible. What does the donations go to? Oh, I'm glad that you asked. Your donation will help to support our production costs. We are working with Jasmine from Pink Lady Productions that brings you this awesome content. And also, we pay our guests an honorarium. Pay our guests an honorarium? Yes, we do. Why? Because as trans men of color, we would like to support and uplift each other and honor the time that's given out to come here and share their stories. So if you love this podcast, share and donate. See you on the next episode. Take care. Some of you, I think it was Kamari, you mentioned about being trans and identifying as gay. You want to speak more on that?
Yeah, so I've always kind of, from the age of 13, would have identified as bisexual up until a few years ago. And I still honestly don't feel like there's a word to describe my sexuality. I say gay interchangeably with queer, with sexually open. I think I enjoy the exploration of kink because it takes you out of that space of representation. So if you think about that moment when you come, if you're able to, you're not thinking about, where you're born, the names you hold for yourself, the names people hold for you, all of these like things. Like in that space, you're kind of free from that. And I feel like with kink, the exploration of various things and being around various people, it just kind of takes you away from that. So I don't know. Yeah, gay, queer, sexually fluid. It's been interesting. I'm currently in a relationship now, but I feel like the dating scene as a gay trans man has definitely changed. Like apps, dating is just wild in general, but like the apps have changed. I remember when I was earlier on in my transition, like people were just vile. I mean, people still are vile, depends on which app you're on, but people were just, they were a lot more crass in the way they approach trans men, in terms of what you got down there, and it's just a lack of care. Whereas more recently, when I was kind of single and scouting, there seemed to be more of a knowledge of like trans men's bodies. Although still, I'd say overall, we're still quite invisible. Probably more so in the UK than the US, but I still feel like gay trans men are quite invisible. And interestingly, on the app, when I would say I'm trans, people would assume I was a trans woman. So then I'd have to go through the process of explaining, no, I'm a trans man. What's that? And then going into that. These days, I don't bother. I don't really have time to explain. I kind of pursue people that are a bit more clued up. But yeah, it's been interesting. I've definitely seen a shift in people's knowledge and understanding, and therefore how people respond to trans men within the context of sex and dating and relationships.
You mentioned kink. Would you mind describing that a bit for folks who are not familiar with that?
Oh, God. Well, I'm not an expert, disclaimer. But I describe kink as your sexual tastes, and it's kind of part of BDSM. When you say BDSM, a lot of people think of 50 Shades. They often think it's a very white thing, and there's actually a community of Black queer kinksters out there. Some of the things you may have heard of surrounding kink may be like certain fetishes or role play or things like that, or more extreme practices that may include pain or, as I like to say, intense pleasure. But essentially, it's about power play, and it's grounded in consent. And even the more extreme or seemingly extreme forms of play center around consent, that the two people have to agree in order for this situation, scene, play to happen.
What do you think is the stigma around trans men identifying as being gay? I know from my own experience, I've always, like I said before, I came out as lesbian, but as I started to transition, I was actually married for 13 years. And I actually had a relationship outside of my marriage, which kind of shifted my marriage with a femme cisgendered man. And I think the stigma for me per se, what always goes into my mind is people will think, and I guess this goes back to the people pleasing, right? But it makes me think people will think that, well, why did you transition if you just was going to date a man? So what do you think is the stigma around that of being a gay trans identified person?
Yeah, the stigma is that is the crux of it. Like, what is the point of transitioning? I've heard people say, oh, you look better as a female, as a girl. I'm like, but I'm not. I think it's just, it's just a lack of understanding of the difference between gender and sexuality. And I think there's a lot of people now that still can't get their head around the difference between the two. I think within the Black community, it's interesting because obviously we always talk about kind of the oppression from people outside of our community, but then there's also homophobia and transphobia within our community, which is tough. And some of that, and yeah, it's complex. So there's that. And then within the culture, maybe faith or religion plays into that. But I predominantly date gay men, Black gay men. And I have experienced a lot of joy in the people that I've seen or dated or experienced whose sexuality and sense of self is not that fragile. They know who they are. They identify as a gay man. They're attracted to me. They see me as well. That's it. Again, that won't be the case for everyone, but I think for people that are kind of open-minded and confident within themselves, they're able to kind of just look past that and experience the person.
I feel like some of our community uses the same white religion that they use to tear our people down and use it as a weapon against us, even going back to the slavery days, to forming that rift between us, to having us use their hatred tactic to tear our own down. And I feel like if we really just come together as one, we're stronger together, and stop being so controlled by that, you know what I'm saying? And really take a step back and say, hey, it doesn't matter what you like to do, what you do in your life. I see you as this, you know what I'm saying? Like we have to stick together. So I think that a lot of work has to be done in our community as far as stigmas, especially with gay Black men, trans gay men, you know what I'm saying? Like nobody wants to talk about it. It's pushed under the rug. And I think we can be our worst enemy sometimes with that.
I know for myself, I was always like, it's a lot. It's just a lot. I'm like, I'm Black. I'm a trans identified man. Now, attracted to men. Like I felt like it was a lot, and I felt like it was a lot to process in my own mind. Does anybody else feel that way? Like it's a lot. It was just too much for me to process. I needed to take on one thing at a time. I couldn't take it on. I couldn't take it all on. Did anybody else that resonate?
Yes, absolutely. For a while, it felt like I was behind in my own life, and more people knew more about me than I did, which was incredibly, incredibly frustrating. Because even before I transitioned, I was never your average type of person. And I did identify as a lesbian for quite some time. But even then, I struggled in my relationship simply because I felt like I had to be this one way in order to attract what it was that I wanted. So I figured, you know, back then the whole stud for stud thing wasn't really, a thing. At least it wasn't something that was very much acknowledged or widely acknowledged. And from what little I heard about it, it was very frowned upon, But that was just the circles that I rolled with, When I was younger, I rolled with a very tough crowd, and in Compton, which is where I'm from, and so the culture, really, the queer culture within um, communities like that is very, very different. It looks very different than what you would see in, say, like West Hollywood or something of the sort. Being queer and Black in South Central back in the 90s read very different from San Francisco. And so you had to adapt to that because that is, because that was your environment. And so for me, I felt like I had to present this way in order to attract what it was I wanted. And so, but it never lasted because what would happen in my relationships was that I eventually started being complained about, like, you know, sometimes you act like a dude. It's me. I'm supposed to be doing all that. I'm just like, but why? I can do it. It just things like that. That's just a very brief example. And as I got older and expanded my community where I hung out, the types of people that I hung out with, not so much with the tough crowd anymore. That's when I began to see more, and it began to dawn on me that, oh, I can't. That there are all types of relationships and attractions and things like that exist. But going from those communities and then coming back to mine, it was really, really difficult simply because it was almost like code switching in a sense, right? Like which we all know about and we've all done. But for those who don't, code switching basically when you pretty much change your demeanor and your speech pattern to fit the environment in which you find yourself in. We do it at work, we do it at school, and then we come home and so be it. But with my sexuality and my gender, it felt like for many years I was code switching so much. And it wasn't until I met my godmother of all people, who was a dynamic woman with an incredibly, even more dynamic life, who inadvertently just began to see me as I was. She was the first person who ever brought me a suit because she just wanted to see how it looked on me and even offered to get it tailored for me. And she was the very first person who identified me with male pronouns just as compliments. Like when she first saw the suit, example, she was the first one to be like, "Oh shit, boyfriend, here we go." And I'd be like, "Wait, what did you just say?" And not realizing how on point that felt, though. Like it felt like some sort of a relief or a release for me. And she gave me that and then continued that. And having that support from this elder Black woman who was raised in, the deepest parts of the South, that slowly began to change everything. And as I began to find my way more, it began to not feel like sensory overload because now I knew how to begin tackling or dealing with one issue because now I could start naming what it is that I was feeling. Because when we can't name things, sometimes it becomes incredibly frustrating, which is what many trans people and even many more gender nonconforming people go through. And, that was the beginning and that was the start. Kink was another one because what I found out very quickly in the BDSM, kink, SM dominant communities, being trans, it's so at least in my experience, has been incredibly, incredibly inclusive. It's so easy to find your place there. It's so easy to find family, find home, find people who also connect, really gain your understanding of what consent means and how that affects other parts of your life, understand your body more, what it needs, what it doesn't like. It took the better of 20 years for me to go through that. And I didn't come out as trans until I was 35. I just turned 43. I just have been on testosterone for 7 months. And all of it was a process, and all of it at the beginning, it was difficult to handle. It did almost cause me to break and do myself some really real harm. Some people sadly have to go through that to get to where they are. Thankfully, many more don't have to. And so if there's anything that I want my current life to reflect, is that, it's pretty much like a phoenix through the ashes rises something, even more beautiful and more brilliant and more bright than they ever were before, because now they are, in their learning how to be their highest form of self, their authentic way of being, which is the highest form of self that you could ever possibly be. So because of that, I'm glad that I went through everything that I went through, because it led me to here.
I don't want to brush past your shirt though. Your shirt say let niggas be gay.
That's right.
Did you wear that on purpose? Did you wear that today on purpose?
No, actually, I've actually been wearing this all day. It's just that I had my hoodie on, and it got incredibly hot in my house. But no, I wear this in the daylight at Target. I am so completely unashamed, and I'm really proud of the person, the company who made the shirt. So, I wear it really as, like so many shirts that I have, like as an act of resistance. I especially love wearing it at Pride. Really, we recently had like an end of summer thing here. I live in Charlotte, North Carolina now. We recently had like an end of summer bash here with Black Gay Pride, and I wore this, and everybody was just like, immediately yes. So it was, it's great to wear it around a bunch of cis, non-POC people, because they don't know what to make of it, and that was me at lunch today. So I yeah, I absolutely do it, and it also just gives me a sense of how big and bad can I really be. You know what I mean? So I don't know. It may seem very vain or shallow, it's just a shirt, but our clothes and what we wear and how we present, it makes up so much of us.
Absolutely.
In this particular life. So even just a simple T-shirt like this, yeah, you do have to kind of have a bit of a backbone to wear this, and I'm pretty sure that's what the designer of the shirt had in mind when they created it, to give it to people, to present it to people who absolutely honestly felt the same way. And plus, I mean, yeah, we really should be letting niggas be gay. Let niggas just do what we gonna do.
And where can we get one of those shirts?
Anything.
Right.
Their name is Dat Crafty Des. So DAT Crafty, and then D is in dog, EZ is in zebra. And they are on Instagram, I do believe. They do have a big cartel websites with that same name. And they were out of stock for quite some time. I've actually been trying to get this shirt for nearly a year. They just started having stock back in. So as soon as they did, I was on it. But they have crop sweatshirts, I believe, and some other things to go along with it, and hoodies and whatnot. So I was happy to get it just because of the message. And I also really just wanted to support just another person who is doing what they're doing. I don't know them personally. We've never met, but do we really need to? We just need to support folks.
Right. Exactly.
You know.
Exactly. So when I think about when folks talking about transitioning, and this is for anyone, when I think about transitioning, they say, "Oh, well, you'll never be able to find someone. You'll never be able to find love." Nobody wants to deal with that. I've heard that actually. That was something that I've heard. Is there anybody here that's had that experience or want to speak on that about finding love and being in a relationship? Dallas, you're in a relationship for 13 years, like, but it just newly transitioning, but even with who you are, like, did you ever feel like I won't be able to find somebody to love me exactly the way I am? Anybody with that experience?
Yes. Yeah, it's a scary thing. And I think, particularly for me, my relationship with my family was strained. So the pressure to have a relationship or something else has always been like, and even in a relationship now, I still have those fears that, it might just like crumble and fall apart because I'm not worthy of, but I've had to do a lot of work on myself to get some of those voices and thoughts out of my head. I'd say for anyone listening, it is possible. You are worthy of love. You're worthy of being here. But yeah, there's a lot of work I had to do. And interesting, going back to the conversation we were having earlier, it was making peace with my former self. I remember there's trans guys I spoke to that were like, "Oh, when I get my transition done or when I get my surgery, I'm out of it. Like I'm a man. Don't even think about that person." And it's like I couldn't do that without sacrificing a part of myself. But yeah, just for me, therapy was a big thing, and I'd recommend it for anyone that has the means or capacity. But there's also a lot of free initiatives out there. I've seen also since the pandemic a lot of therapy initiatives for trans people specifically, more in the UK. I'm not sure kind of what's happening in the US, but yeah, do look out for stuff like that. Because yeah, we experience a lot, and I feel like a lot of us just kind of go through the motions because we have to. We have so many things thrown at us, but when or if you get the moment to stop, do check in with someone and try and talk to someone. When I came out, I was homeless and I didn't have somewhere to live for about probably 4 or 5 years after. I was in hostels and sofa surfing and sleeping on people's floors, and it took a long time for me to be settled. And therapy was the last thing I was thinking about. But if or when you are settled, do reach out for help and support, because I think for me, it just reframed my thinking. It rewired my thinking about my self-identity and love, and again, self-worth. And it allowed me to kind of start from scratch and go, okay, this is who I am. Who do I want around me? What do I want around me? What does that look like? And being confident enough to go for it.
I'm always talking about therapy. I'm an advocate of therapy. I recommend it to anybody, young, old, whatever. I think it helps, and it definitely helps in transition. It definitely helps in figuring out, helping you to come to not, I won't say a conclusion, but it helps you to figure yourself out. It helps you to get some things under control, mood stabilized, and everything. I really thank you for mentioning therapy. I think that's really helpful and useful. Thank you for listening to today's show. Once again, I'm your host. My name is Sean Aaron. Be sure to like, be sure to share this show out with folks in your networks. If you would like to connect with us, be sure to follow us on Instagram and Facebook. You can also visit our website at themboys.org. That's DEMBOIS.org. If you think you will make a great guest on this show, or maybe you have a question for myself or a future guest that you would like to hear answered on the show, please send an email to hello@themboys.org. That's HELLO@themboys.org. Until next time, take care.